Lest Darkness Fall continues as read by the bathroom reader. I'm covering for the Plurality Report, who is happy to say, we're back. Chapter 12. Little by little, Ravenna's nonce population flowed away, like trickles of water from a wet sponge on a tile floor. A big trickle flowed north as 50,000 Goths marched back toward Dalmatia. Padway prayed that Asenar, who seemed to have little more glimmering of intelligence than Grypus, would not have another brainstorm and come rushing back to Italy before he'd accomplished anything. Padway did not dare leave Italy long enough to take command of the campaign himself. He did what he could by sending some of his personal guard along to teach the Goths horse archery tactics. Asenar might decide to ignore this newfangled nonsense as soon as he was out of sight, or the cuirassiers might desert to Count Constantianus, but there was no point in anticipating calamities. Padway finally found time to pay his respects to Mathaswentha. He told himself that he was merely being polite and making a useful contact, but he knew that actually he didn't want to leave Ravenna without another look at the luscious wench. The Gothic princess received him graciously. She spoke excellent Latin, in a rich contralto vibrant with good health. "I thank you, excellent Martinus, for saving me from that beast. I shall never be able to repay you properly." They walked into her living room. Padway found that it was no effort at all to keep in step with her, but then she was almost as tall as he was. "It was very little, my lady," he said. "We just happened to arrive at an opportune time." "Don't deprecate yourself, Martinus. I know a lot about you. It takes a real man to accomplish all you have, especially when one considers that you arrived in Italy a stranger only a little over a year ago." "I do what I must, princess. It may seem impressive to others, but to me it's more as if I had been forced into each action by circumstances, regardless of my intentions." "A fatalistic doctrine, Martinus. I could almost believe that you're a pagan. Not that I'd mind." Padway laughed. "Hardly. I understand that you can still find pagans if you hunt around the Italian hills." "No doubt. I should like to visit some of the little villages some day, with a good guide, of course." "I ought to be a pretty good guide after the amount of running around I've done in the last couple of months." "Would you take me? Be careful. I'll hold you to it, you know." "That doesn't worry me any, princess, but it would have to be some day. At the present rate, God knows when I'll get time for anything but war and politics, neither of which is my proper trade." "What is it, then?" "I was a gatherer of facts, a kind of historian of periods that had no history. I suppose you could call me a historical philosopher." "You're a fascinating person, Martinus. I can see why they call you mysterious. But if you don't like war and politics, why do you engage in them?" "That would be hard to explain, my lady. In the course of my work in my own country, I had occasion to study the rise and fall of many civilizations. In looking around me here, I see many symptoms of a fall."
"Really? That's a strange thing to say. Of course, my own people and barbarians like the Franks have occupied most of the Western Empire. But they're not a danger to civilization. They protect it from the real wild men like the Bulgarian Huns and the Slavs. I can't think of a time when our Western culture was more secure."
"You're entitled to your opinion, milady," said Padway. "I merely put together such facts as I have, and draw what conclusions I can. Facts such as the decline in the population of Italy, despite the Gothic immigrations, and such things as the volume of shipping."
"Shipping? I never thought of measuring civilization that way. But in any event, that doesn't answer my question."
Trigus, to use one of your own Gothic words. Well, I want to prevent the darkness of barbarism from falling over Western Europe. It sounds conceited, the idea that one man could do anything like that, but I can try. One of the weaknesses of our present setup is slow communication, so I promote the telegraph company. And because my backers are Roman patricians suspected of Grecophile leanings, I find myself in politics up to my neck. One thing leads to another, until today I'm practically running Italy.
Marthas Waintha looked thoughtful. I suppose the trouble with slow communication is that a general can revolt or an invader overrun the border weeks before the central government hears about it.
Right. I can see you are your mother's daughter. If I wanted to patronize you, I should say that you had a man's mind. She smiled.
On the contrary, I should be very much pleased. At least, if you mean a man like yourself. Most of the men around here, bah, squalling infants without one idea among them. When I marry, it must be to a man. Shall we say both of thought and action?
Padway met her eyes, and was aware that his heart had stepped up several beats per minute. I hope you find him, Princess.
I may yet.
She sat up straight and looked at him directly, almost defiantly, quite unconcerned with the inner confusion she was causing him. He noticed that sitting up straight didn't make her look any less desirable. On the contrary. She continued.
That's the reason I'm so grateful to you for saving me from the beast. Of all these thick-headed ninnies, they had the thickest head. What became of him, by the way? Don't pretend innocence, Martinus. Everybody knows your guards took him into the vestibule of the church, and then he apparently vanished.
He's safe, I hope, both from our point of view and his.
You mean you hid him? Death would have been safer yet.
I had reasons for not wanting him killed.
You did? I give you fair warning that if he ever falls into my hands, I shall not have such reasons.
Aren't you a bit hard on poor old Witigius? He was merely trying in his own muddle-headed way to defend the kingdom.
Perhaps, but after that performance in the church, I hate him.
The grey eyes were cold as ice.
And when I hate, I don't do it halfway.
So I see, said Padway dryly, jarred out of the pink fog for the moment. But then Marthas Waintha smiled again, all curvesome and desirable woman.
You'll stay to dinner, of course. There will only be a few people, and they'll leave early.
Why? There were piles of work to be done that evening, and he needed to catch up on his sleep, a chronic condition with him. Why, thank you, milady. I shall be delighted. By the third visit to Marthas Waintha, Padway was saying to himself, There's a real woman, ravishing good looks, forceful character, keen brain. The man who gets her will have 1 in a million. Why shouldn't I be the one? She seems to like me. With her to back me up, there's nothing I couldn't accomplish. Of course, she is a bit bloodthirsty. You wouldn't exactly describe her as a sweet girl. But that's the fault of the times, not of her. She'll settle down when she has a man of her own to do her fighting for her. In other words, Padway was as thoroughly in love as such a rational and prudent man can ever be. But how did one go about marrying a Gothic princess? You certainly didn't take her out in an automobile and kiss her lipstick off by way of a starter. Nor did you begin by knowing her in high school, the way he had known Betty. She was an orphan, so you couldn't approach her old man. He supposed that the only thing to do was to bring the subject up a little at a time and see how she reacted. He asked, Marthas Waintha, my dear, when you spoke of the kind of man you'd like to marry, did you have any other specifications in mind? She smiled at him, whereat the room swam slightly.
Curious, Martinus. I didn't have many, aside from those I mentioned. Of course, he shouldn't be too much older than I, as Witigius was.
You wouldn't mind if he wasn't much taller than you?
No, unless he were a mere shrimp.
You haven't any objections to large noses?
She laughed, a rich, throaty laugh. Martinus, you are the funniest man. I suppose it's that you and I are different. I go directly for what I want, whether it's love or revenge or anything else.
What do I do?
You walk all around it and peer at it from every angle and spend a week figuring out whether you want it badly enough to risk taking it. She added quickly, Don't think I mind. I like you for it.
I'm glad of that. But about noses...
Of course I don't mind. I think yours, for instance, is aristocratic-looking, nor do I mind little red beards or wavy brown hair or any of the other features of an amazing young man named Martinus Padua. That's what you were getting at, wasn't it?
Padua knew a great relief. This marvelous woman went out of her way to ease your difficulties. As a matter of fact, it was, Princess.
You needn't be so frightfully respectful, Martinus. Anybody would know you are a foreigner, the way you meticulously use all the proper titles and epithets.
Padua grinned. I don't like to take chances, as you know. Well, you see now, it's this way. I was wondering, if you don't dislike these, characteristics, whether you couldn't learn to,
You don't by any chance mean love, do you?
Yes, said Padua loudly.
With practice I might.
Phew, said Padua, mopping his forehead.
I'd need teaching, said Martha Swingtha. I've lived a sheltered life and know little of the world.
I looked up the law, said Padua quickly, and while there's an ordinance against marriage of Goths to Italians, there's nothing about Americans. So...
Martha Swingtha interrupted. I could hear you better, dear Martinus, if you came closer.
Padua went over and sat down beside her. He began again. The edicts of Theoderic,
she said softly. I know the laws, Martinus. That is not what I need instruction in.
Padua suppressed his tendency to talk frantically of impersonal matters to cover emotional turmoil. He said, My love, your first lesson will be this. He kissed her hand. Her eyes were half closed, her mouth slightly open, and her breath was quick and shallow. She whispered,
Do the Americans, then, practice the art of kissing as we do?
He gathered her in and applied the second lesson. Martha Swingtha opened her eyes, blinked, and shook her head.
That was a foolish question, my dear Martinus. The Americans are way ahead of us. What ideas you put in an innocent girl's head!
She laughed joyfully. Padua laughed too. Padua said, You've made me very happy, Princess.
You've made me happy too, my prince. I thought I should never find anyone like you.
She swayed into his arms again. Martha Swingtha sat up and straightened her hair. She said in a brisk, business-like manner,
There are a lot of questions to settle before we decide anything, finally. Witigius, for instance.
What about him? Padua's happiness suddenly wasn't quite so complete.
He'll have to be killed, naturally.
Oh?
Don't oh me, my dear. I warned you that I am no half-hearted hater. And Theudahad, too.
Why him? She straightened up, frowning.
He murdered my mother, didn't he? What more reason do you want? And eventually you will want to become king yourself.
No, I won't, said Padua.
Not want to be king? Why, Martinus!
Not for me, my dear. Anyhow, I'm not an Ameling.
As my husband, you will be considered one.
I still don't want.
Now, darling, you just think you don't. You will change your mind. While we are about it, there is that former serving wench of yours, Julia, I think her name is.
What about... what do you know about her?
Enough. We women hear everything sooner or later.
The little cold spot in Padway's stomach spread and spread. But...
Now, Martinus, it's a small favor that your betrothed is asking, and don't think that a person like me would be jealous of a mere house servant. But it would be a humiliation to me if she were living after our marriage. It needn't be a painful death. Some quick poison.
Padway's face turned as blank as that of a renting agent at the mention of cockroaches. His mind was whirling. There seemed to be no end to Mathas Waintha's lethal little plans. His underwear was damp with cold sweat. He knew now that he was not in the least in love with Mathas Waintha. Let some roaring Goth have this fierce blonde Valkyr. He preferred a girl with less direct ideas of getting what she wanted, and no insuranceman would give a policy on a member of the Amal clan, considering their dark and bloody past.
Well, said Mathas Waintha. He was thinking, frantically, how to get out of this fix.
I just remembered, he said slowly. I have a wife back in America.
Oh, a fine time to think of that, she answered coldly.
I haven't seen her for a long time.
Well then, there's a divorce, isn't there?
Not in my religion. We Congregationalists believe there's a special compartment in hell for frying divorced persons.
Martinus! Her eyes were a pair of grey blowtorches. You're trying to back out. No man shall ever do that to me and live to tell.
No, not at all, cried Padway. Nothing of the sort, my dear. I'd wade through rivers of blood to reach your side.
A very pretty speech, Martinus Padway. Do you use it on all the girls?
I mean it. I'm mad about you.
Then why don't you act as if...
I'm devoted to you. It was stupid of me not to think of this obstacle sooner.
Do you really love me? She softened a little.
Of course I do. I've never known anyone like you. That last sentence was truthful. But facts are facts. Mathas Waintha rubbed her forehead, obviously struggling with conflicting emotions. She asked,
If you haven't seen her for so long, how do you know she's even alive?
I don't, but I don't know that she isn't. You know how strict your laws are about bigamy. Edicts of Athalaric, paragraph 6. I looked it up.
You would, she said with some bitterness. Does anyone else in Italy know about this American bitch of yours?
No, but...
Then aren't you being a bit silly, Martinus? What difference does it make if she's on the other side of the earth?
Religion.
Oh, the devil fly away with the priests. I'll handle the Arians when we're in power. For the Catholics, you have influence with the Bishop of Bologna, I hear, and that means with the Pope.
I don't mean the churches. I mean my personal convictions.
A practical fellow like you? Nonsense. You're using them as an excuse.
Padway, seeing the fires about to flare up again, interrupted. Now, Mathas Waintha, you don't want to start a religious argument, do you? You let my creed alone, and I'll say nothing against yours. Oh, I've just thought of a solution.
What?
I'll send a messenger to America to find out whether my wife is still alive.
How long will that take?
Weeks, months, perhaps. If you really love me, you won't mind waiting.
I'd wait, she said without enthusiasm. She looked up sharply. Suppose your messenger finds the woman alive.
We'll worry about that when the time comes.
Oh, no, we won't. We'll settle this now.
Look, darling, don't you trust your future husband? Then...
Don't evade, Martinus. You're as slippery as a Byzantine lawyer.
In that case, I suppose I'd take a chance on my immortal...
Oh, but Martinus, she cried cheerfully, how stupid of me not to see the answer before. You shall instruct your messenger, if he finds her alive, to poison her. Such things can always be managed discreetly."
"That is an idea."
"It's the obvious idea. I'd prefer it to a mere divorce anyway, for the sake of my good name. Now all our worries are over." She hugged him with disconcerting violence.
"I suppose they are," said Padway with an utter lack of conviction. "Let's continue our lessons, dearest." He kissed her again, trying for a record this time. She smiled up at him and sighed happily.
"You shall never kiss anyone else, my love."
"I wouldn't think of it, Princess."
"You'd better not," she said. "You will forgive me, dear boy, for getting a little upset just now. I am but an innocent young girl with no knowledge of the world and no will of her own."
At least, thought Padway, he was not the only liar present. He stood up and pulled her to her feet. "I must go now. I'll send the messenger off the first thing, and tomorrow I leave for Rome."
"Oh, Martinus, you surely don't have to go. You just think you do."
"No, really. State business, you know. I'll think of you all the way." He kissed her hand again. "Be brave, my dear. Smile now." She smiled a trifle tearfully and squeezed the breath out of him. When Padway got back to his quarters, he hauled his orderly, an Armenian cuirassier, out of bed. "Put on your right boot," he ordered. The man rubbed his eyes.
"Me right boot? Do I understand you, noble sir?"
"You do. Quickly now." When the yellow rawhide boot was on, Padway turned his back to the orderly and bent over. He said over his shoulder, "You will give me a swift kick in the fundament, my good Turdat." Turdat's mouth fell open.
"Kick, my commander?"
"You heard me the first time. Go ahead. Now." Turdat shuffled uneasily, but at Padway's glare he finally hauled off and let fly. The kick almost sent Padway sprawling. He straightened up, rubbing the spot. "Thank you, Turdat. You may go back to bed." He started for the wash bowl to brush his teeth with a willow twig. Must start the manufacture of real toothbrushes one of these days, he thought. He felt much better. But Padway did not set off for Rome the next day, or even the day after that. He began to learn that the position of King's Quaestor was not just a nice, well-paying job that let you order people around and do as you pleased. First, Waccus Thuriman's son, a Gothic noble of the royal council, came around with a rough draft of a proposed amendment to the law against horse-stealing. He explained.
Retigus agreed to this revision of the law, but the counter-revolution took place before he had a chance to change it. So, excellent Martinus, it's up to you to discuss the matter with the Udahad. Put the amendment in proper legal language and try to hold the king's attention long enough to get his signature.
Waccus grinned.
And may the saints help you if he is in a stubborn mood, my lad.
Padway wondered what the devil to do. Then he dug up Cassiodorus, who, as head of the Italian civil service, ought to know the ropes. The old scholar proved a great help, though Padway saw fit to edit some of the unnecessarily flowery phrases of the prefect's draft. He asked Urius around for lunch. Urius came and was friendly enough, though still somewhat bitter about the treatment of his uncle Witiges. Padway liked him, he thought. I can't hold out on Mathaswentha indefinitely, and I shan't dare take up with another girl while she looks on me as a suitor. But this fellow is big and good-looking, and he seems intelligent. If I could engineer a match... He asked Urius whether he was married. Urius raised eyebrows.
No, why?
I just wondered. What do you intend to do with yourself now?
I don't know. Go rusticate on my land in Pessinum, I suppose. It'll be a dull life after the soldiering I've been doing the past few years.
Padway asked casually. Have you ever met the Princess Mathaswentha?
Not formally, I arrived in Ravenna only a few days ago for the wedding. I saw her in the church, of course, when you barged in. She's attractive, isn't she?
Quite so. She's a person worth knowing. If you like, I'll try to arrange a meeting. Padway, as soon as Urius had gone, rushed around to Mathaswintha's house. He contrived to make his arrival look as unpremeditated as possible. He started to explain.
I've been delayed, my dear. I may not get off to Rome.
Mathaswintha had slid her arms around his neck and stopped his little speech in the most effective manner. Padway didn't dare seem tepid, but that wasn't at all difficult. The only trouble was that it made coherent thought impossible at a time when he wanted all his craft. And the passionate wench seemed satisfied to stand in the vestibule and kiss him all afternoon. She finally said, "Now, what were you saying, my dearest?" Padway finished his statement.
So I thought I'd drop in for a moment. It's just as well I'm going to Rome. I shall never get any work done as long as I'm in the city with you. Do you know Witigis's nephew Urius, by the way?
No, and I'm not sure I want to. When we kill Witigis, we shall naturally have to consider killing his nephews too. I have a silly prejudice against murdering people I know socially.
Oh, my dear, I think that's a mistake. He's a splendid young man. You'd really like him. He's one Goth with both brains and character. Probably the only one.
Well, I don't know.
And I need him in my business, only he's got scruples against working for me. I thought maybe you could work your flashing smile on him to soften him up a bit.
If you think I could really help you, perhaps.
Thus the Gothic princess had Padway and Urius for company at dinner that night. Mathaswintha was pretty cool to Urius at first, but they drank a good deal of wine, and she unbent. Urius was good company. Presently they were all laughing uproariously at his imitation of a drunken Hun, and at Padway's hastily translated off-color stories. Padway taught the other two a Greek popular song that Tirdat, his orderly, had brought from Constantinople. If Padway hadn't been conscious of a small gnawing anxiety for the success of his various plots, he'd have said he was having the best time of his life.